Today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest but most invisible obstacles in healthcare: mental health stigma. It's this silent barrier that stops millions of people from getting the support they need. So let's dive in and break down what it is, how it works, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
I mean, really think about that for a second. If you break your arm, you go to a doctor, right? You tell your friends, you tell your family, you tell your boss. There's zero shame, no hesitation. But when it comes to our mental health, well, that conversation is often completely different. So why is that?
Well, a huge part of the reason is this: invisible wall. It's not made of bricks and mortar, of course. It's built from something way more powerful: fear, negative stereotypes, and just deep-seated misunderstandings that have been piling up for generations. So let's put an official name on it. This is stigma. At its core, stigma is just powerful social disapproval. It takes all those negative stereotypes and prejudices and weaponizes them into real-world discrimination. And its main job is to separate people, to make someone feel like an outsider in their own community, all because of a health condition. And the consequences of this wall, they're just staggering. Get this, a massive 75% of children and young people with mental health problems don't get the treatment they desperately need. And the number one reason? You guessed it, it's stigma. Okay, so if stigma is a wall, then what exactly is it made of? It turns out it's not just one thing. Let's break down the four main types of stigma. These are the actual bricks that build this barrier. First up, you've got public stigma. This is the one you probably think of first. It's all those negative attitudes and stereotypes that society as a whole holds. You know, the false idea that people with mental illness are somehow unpredictable or that they're to blame for their own condition. And what happens when you hear those public messages over and over again? Well, often they get turned inward, which leads to our second type, self-stigma. This is when a person starts to believe all those negative stereotypes about themselves. It leads to this deep sense of shame and worthlessness that makes it even harder to ask for help. Then there's structural stigma. This is when all that public prejudice gets baked right into our systems, into our laws, our company policies, even how we fund healthcare. It leads to fewer resources, less research, and just real, tangible disadvantages for people with mental health conditions. And finally, there's a type of stigma that shows up where you'd least expect it: health provider stigma. I mean, you'd think the one place you'd be safe is with a doctor or therapist, right? But sometimes even professionals can hold biases, conscious or not, that get in the way of providing good, empathetic care. Okay, so let's zoom out for a minute. Because this wall of stigma, it doesn't look the same everywhere you go. The blueprints for it are actually shaped by different cultural norms, values, and beliefs all over the world. Just take a look at this quote from a study in Pakistan. In some Pashtun communities, there's a cultural code that places a huge emphasis on honor. So admitting a mental health issue isn't just a personal thing. It can be seen as bringing shame on the entire family. And the result? It gets hidden away, which leads straight to isolation. And these cultural stories are incredibly diverse. In many Asian cultures, preserving face is key, so mental illness might be seen as a personal weakness. In parts of Africa or the Arab world, it might be connected to supernatural causes or seen as a test of faith. And yeah, even in Western cultures, where we talk about it as a medical issue, it's still often tied to these old, misplaced fears about people being unpredictable. Every culture uses slightly different materials to build its wall. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated. For some people, that wall gets even higher. Imagine you're part of a marginalized community, like the LGBTQ+ community. You're already dealing with societal prejudice. That adds a whole other layer of stigma on top of everything else. It's a phenomenon called minority stress.
So this wall sounds pretty tough, right? But here's the good news. There are ways through it. So let's talk about some of the tools and truths that are helping people find a way around these barriers to get the support they need.
You know, one of the biggest tools we have is simply debunking myths. For example, there's this common idea that all therapy is the same, but the truth is therapy isn't some one-size-fits-all key. It's a really personal, tailored process with all kinds of different approaches designed for very specific needs and goals. And speaking of new tools, technology is a total game changer here. Digital mental health specifically is creating brand new pathways around that wall and completely reshaping how people can access support. What makes these digital tools so great is that they tackle some of the biggest barriers head-on. They're available 24/7, they can offer anonymity, which directly fights that fear of public stigma, and of course, they're accessible from literally anywhere.
offering everything from coaching apps to full-on teletherapy.
Finding paths through the wall is so important for individuals. But what about tearing the whole thing down for everyone? Let's look at the big, large-scale strategies that are actually working to dismantle stigma for good.
And we know it's possible because it's already happening. Big public awareness campaigns have shown that they can work. A perfect example is the Time to Change campaign in England. They set out with a clear goal to totally transform how the public thinks and acts about mental health.
And you know what? It worked. Studies found that the campaign led to an 8.3% improvement in public attitudes. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but when you're talking about shifting the mindset of an entire country, that is massive. It's hard proof that these efforts can genuinely chip away at stigma. So how do we do it? Well, the research points to a clear 4-step playbook. First, more public awareness campaigns to fight myths with facts. Second, peer support programs, because hearing from someone who's been there is incredibly powerful. Third, cultural competency training for doctors and nurses to fight stigma from inside the system. And finally, integrating mental health into primary care, so it's treated just like any other part of our health. Which brings us right back to that wall. It wasn't built overnight, and it's not going to be torn down overnight either. It was built brick by individual actions, beliefs, and conversations. So the real question is this: what's one brick that you can help remove from that wall today?